we're going to thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. So this year, Natural Habitat, we've planted quite a few trees and we've given away 875 whips of shrubs and things. And for right now, we're more or less paused because what we thought we would do for nurturing nature is taking a couple of months off so that people are outside, and we're not sure how much people are interested in sitting inside during the summertime. So in August, we're going to pick up with the mosquito abatement district actually, and Mark Clifton is just he's the executive director, but also great. And he will talk about ticks as well as mosquitoes and trying to reduce individual fogging and letting the mosquito abatement district handle it. So that'll be our conversation in August. And if anyone has ideas about topics that they'd like to hear about, I would love that. So please do, reach out to me or email me if I just emailed everyone the link, so everyone should have my email to send me suggestions for things. And by the way, I want to also mention that in terms of the fall tree giveaway, we'll give away trees for the 2nd, 5th, and 8th wards. So we're expanding the number of wards that where we would talk with you about what kind of tree you'd like. The only requirement is that they be native trees. And we're doing trees, but I'll tell you, we count some large bushes as trees, like elderberry and hazelnut and all those things. So large shrubs and trees, basically. So yeah, that's all. I wanted to put the questions during the talks into the chat, and we'll follow up with that at the end of the we'll have 2 speakers, and I'm going to introduce the first, who's Holly Greenberg. And then Libby Shafer will talk second, and then we'll do questions at the end. I wanted to introduce Holly. So Holly is incredibly creative. She's an artist activist. She harvested invasive plants, buckthorn, to spread the word on invasive species, and then she uses upcycled cloth and crowdsourced participation to raise awareness about bird collisions and other issues. And she's here to talk with us as artist director of the bird collisions in the Anthropocene. She's a printmaker and painter with 25 years as a tenured art professor at Syracuse University in New York. She worked with undergraduate and graduate students on printmaking. She's done fantastic outreach and engagement on her Anthropocene and bird collisions project. New York State and Chicago school districts have been involved. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology is involved, Field Museum, Peggy Notebart, and then Chicago and Evanston nonprofits, including Natural Habitat. We try to do what we can, which is this much, but it's what we can. And then during workshops, she provides education and solutions about the widespread problems of bird collisions. So it's the journey is the thing as well as the thing is the thing, because in the course of the journey, she's really teaching so many people about bird collisions. So Holly, I am thrilled that you're joining us, and I'm going to switch my share to do your, hi, I'm going to switch my share to your video, which I did not immediately pop up. So I'm going to go here.
Yeah. Thank you, Leslie. We're going to start with this video that explains the project.
Okay, here I am. I got to move this out of the way.
I think you're okay. Just go down to the
okay.
that double arrow on the right. There you go.
On October 5th, 2023, nearly 1,000 birds died from window collisions with a single building in Chicago. The following day, the artist Holly Greenberg launched the Bird Collisions and the Anthropocene Art Project in an effort to raise awareness about these preventable deaths. Measuring over 300 feet in length, this sculptural carpet will be comprised of 10,836 handcrafted bird replicas, one for each bird killed and collected in 2023 in Chicago, the most dangerous city in the U.S. for birds. Integral to the making of this large-scale sculptural artwork is the public's involvement in its creation. Working with data from Chicago's Field Museum and the Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, the project invites citizens of the world to help craft the bird replicas in pop-up art workshops at street fairs, nature centers, art galleries, bookstores, office buildings, community centers, and beyond. Using upcycled donated cloth, scissors, and glue, each person is assigned a specific bird that died from a window strike, given photos and information about the species, and then spends 30 to 60 minutes crafting a replica. The bird is tagged with the maker's name, hometown, as well as the species' common and scientific names, the date, and the location of its death. A searchable database will accompany the exhibition of the sculptural carpet, allowing participants to locate their bird in the final artwork. This crowdsourcing component gives every participant authorship of the artwork. A key aspect of the workshops is educating participants on making their windows safer for birds, along with distributing free materials to do so. We are all in this together.
Thank you so much, Holly. So you're going to share now?
Yep. I just want to ask, it was super glitchy from where I was watching, and I don't know if that was my computer or if
We were
everybody
good.
was glitchy
We
for
were
them.
good. We were all watching
Good.
and it looked fine.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm Holly Greenberg. I'm going to give you a little background about myself, and then I'll talk about this bird collisions in the Anthropocene project. So a little bit about me. I did my master's degree in printmaking at the School of the Art Institute in '94. I got my degree and I lived in Chicago for 8 years. And then I left in 2000 to pursue my teaching career at Syracuse University, where, as Leslie said, I taught printmaking and drawing and book arts. And then I just retired and I returned to Chicagoland and opened my studio headquarters in Evanston in the fall. And you can see in the bottom picture here, this is my cute little storefront studio on Greenleaf Street. Some of you have been there. Since this is a nurturing nature lecture series, I wanted to talk about my passion of native plants. These are a couple projects I did back in Syracuse that were inspired by Doug Tallamy's Homegrown National Park. This is a backyard before and after, planted with native plants to encourage bird habitat. And this is the front lawn, a very typical suburban front lawn, like people only had grass. And this time I grew the native plants from seeds. So on the left, you can see all these individual pots of little seedlings. And then on the right, this is the following summer. So it really grew into this gorgeous native plant garden with lots of sun and lots of pollinators. So let's talk a little bit about the genesis of this bird collisions in the Anthropocene project. On the left here, you can see the folks at Ladd Arboretum here in Evanston. I volunteered with this wonderful group of people that have been diligently and vigilantly removing buckthorn and other invasive species here and planting native plants. I was working with them one day when a woman next to me said, here we are planting native plants to attract birds, and then they're crashing into our windows and dying. And I just looked at her and said, what are you talking about? That was the first I'd heard that Chicago had this horrible problem of birds crashing into windows. Fast forward only about 3 months later, on October 5th, 2023, and this happened, these headlines of nearly 1,000 birds dying in one single night, crashing into a single building, McCormick Place. I read about that in Syracuse, and I decided the following day to launch this project to raise awareness about bird collisions. So my vision was to create a carpet of 10,836 bird replicas. That's the number of birds that died, not just that night, but the entire year in Chicago and was collected by the Chicago bird collision monitors. That data set comes from the Field Museum, and my goal was to make a carpet that showed citizens of Chicago what does an average year of bird collision deaths look like, and spread it down maybe Michigan Avenue or whatnot. Within the 15 minutes, I realized that there was no way I could make all those bird replicas myself in my lifetime. And so I decided I needed to oops, why am I stuck? I'm trying to move forward. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Let's try that. There we go. The realization of scale led to me holding public pop-up workshops where I had citizens of the world help me craft these bird replicas. So here's one at a library in Avondale, and then there's one under a tent in Fountain Square. And so people come, they're assigned a bird from the data set, given a bird body, and to create a replica. Here we can see some kids at Oakton Elementary School enthusiastically choosing their fabrics to decorate their birds. In the middle, a bird, beautiful cedar waxwing created in Syracuse, New York. And then on the right, you can see this gorgeous replica of a black-throated green warbler made with fabric. It's just stunning. We use only donated upcycled cloth and stuffing that would otherwise end up in the landfill, as sustainability is an integral part of this project. Every bird is tagged with the bird's scientific and common name, the location and date of its death, as well as the backside shows the artists who made the bird, their hometown, and the date that it was made. And as you saw in the video, all of this information goes into a searchable database on the computer, as well as a handwritten log that you can see here in the background. During the workshop, I deliver a curriculum. It's a 40-minute discussion while you are held hostage by having your hands covered in glue and fabric. I cover the causes of bird collisions, window remediation techniques. I distribute free materials for treating your windows. We talk about how birds know to migrate and lights out initiatives, the importance of native plants, and respecting that we live in a multi-species city. And then I end with the success of the McCormick Place building. If you don't know about that, McCormick Place had this terrible crash, as I mentioned, on October 5th, 2023. The following summer, they covered the building with $1.2 million worth of feather-friendly dots. That's the dots that you see up there on the screen. And just in time for the following fall migration. And I have people guess how many birds died after the dots were installed, and I get crazy numbers, but the number itself is actually really amazing. Only 18 birds died the following fall migration after the dots were put up. We have been super successful in spreading the word about the project on social media. We printed these zines, which is like a little pamphlet, so that we could send them out to people that wanted to participate that weren't near where we were. And we also have people hosting their own workshops across the US and Canada. So we make everything downloadable from the website. You just fill out this form that says you want to host your own bird making workshop in your city or town or wherever, or your living room. And you can download the template for sewing the bird bodies and all the pages, glue and fabric. And it's been amazing. We've had, it really caught on like wildfire, and communities across the US and Canada have been hosting their own workshops. Over 75 workshops have been held without me, just people across the country. Then they send me the finished birds. So this is just a few of the places across the map where people have been enthusiastically making bird replicas for the project. We send out a quarterly newsletter to update participants on the progress of the project, letting them know how many birds we've made, talking about the window remediation technique of the month, and other interesting information about bird collisions. We've hired over 25 student interns to work on the project, and this has been just such a really cool thing about the project is These young people are learning new skills like sewing, but also talking to people. They are the students that lived through COVID, so sometimes interaction with real life humans is difficult, and this gives them an opportunity to face the public, to talk about bird collisions or help them with crafting or take people's photographs with their birds. So this has been super fun. We've had a tremendous amount of community support. On the left here, we're seeing some middle school sewing volunteers. We've got college student volunteers. The third picture, you might recognize a few of our Evanston community members sewing birds for us. And in the last picture, this is a senior living center in Syracuse, New York, where seniors get together every week to sew and stuff birds for the project and then send them to me here in Evanston. Cornell Anthropology has been an amazing collaborator with this project. We've done several workshops there on site for their guests, but also they commissioned kits and developed accompanying curriculum to send to 1,000 New York State biology students to make birds for the project. New York State has a bird collision requirement lab requirement for every student taking biology. So that is fantastic. So some of the benefits of making a bird replica include real focused looking. It's quite challenging to work with these very awkward materials, fabric and scissors and glue, and try to recreate the beautiful creature that you have photographs of. It requires thinking about how to turn two-dimensional materials into a three-dimensional form, color matching, and everybody is really focused and no one is touching their phone during the 40 to 60 minutes that they're crafting their bird replica. But they're also meeting new people. We have large tables where lots of people are sitting together, people that don't know each other, and they're talking about bird collisions or gardening or something else entirely. But it's wonderful when people are making new friends. And they also feel like they're being part of something larger. Some comments that people have made after the workshops say they felt it was very therapeutic, really relaxing, meditative, and surprisingly enjoyable. Window treatments are really the goal of this whole project. Yes, we're making a bird. Yes, we're doing community outreach, but we are really encouraging people to treat their problematic windows. So here are some examples of people that have made birds for the project and have treated their windows. This is a homeowner that came to a workshop that I held on Nantucket. She talked about her garage window where birds repeatedly crash into. I sent her home with a roll of free feather-friendly collision markers, and she installed it and took this picture, and she's super happy. The second picture is at SUNY ESF, State University of New York, that they have these bus shelters that are glass and birds crash into them. So they commissioned an artist to do a beautiful paint pen drawing on the glass. The third picture is a library in Connecticut where community members had made birds for the project. They recognized that their library was very problematic and birds were crashing into it. They applied for a grant to order the dots, but they didn't have enough funding to install the dots. So they got the local fire department volunteered to install the dots for them. And I think that's just such a great way to use a community resource to help you get to high windows. And the last picture is an elementary school outside of Ithaca, New York, where the students not only made many birds for the project, but they lobbied to their principal to get funds to treat problematic windows. They assessed gathered windows were the most collided with by birds. And then they designed a stencil. They got materials donated by a local hardware store to spray paint through the stencil and build a bird saver. So they are actively trying to treat their school and prevent bird collisions from happening anymore. We've had some amazing partnerships so far. Chicago Bird Alliance is our fiscal sponsor, which allows us to accept tax-deductible donations from citizens like you guys if you want to support the project. Natural Habitat Evanston has been a diehard supporter since the very beginning, promoting our workshops. District 65, right here in Evanston, I have visited many schools, including this Oakton Elementary right here, and the middle school schools and have done bird workshops with many, many students there, hundreds of students. The Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, without their tireless work of collecting dead and injured birds, this project would not be necessary. Syracuse University did give me some initial grant money to hire grad students and get supplies to get the project going. Of course, the Field Museum and their data set, Cornell Lab, as I mentioned. Sustain Evanston gave a small grant to studio. And of course, Feather Friendly is always willing to help us distribute free materials. We've had a ton of press. The Evanston Roundtable has been super supportive of the project, many interviews there. Where we are today, over 4,000 people have made birds for the project. We've held over 150 workshops. We get invitations every week. Every week I get emails from loads of people wanting to come to workshops or hold workshops wherever they are. We average about 8 workshops per month. We are always pursuing grants to support the workshops. We currently have 10 summer interns working for us and 3 community volunteers that are actively sowing birds for us. So what do we need? Well, we need donations of time, such as sewing. So if any of you know how to sew, have a sewing machine, and would like to sew birds, yahoo, we need them. We need about 6,000 more birds sewn. We need donations of materials. We love to use old bed sheets and stuffing or old throw pillows to create the bird bodies. Donations of money to help pay our student interns, buy materials, pay for rent. Again, that's tax deductible through our fiscal sponsor. And now, unfortunately, we need a donation of a space as we are losing the lease on our lovely storefront on Greenleaf. I just found out last night that I will not have my lease renewed in December. So we're looking for a larger studio space. I'd love it to be in Evanston. So if you know of any empty spaces that people want to donate as a tax deduction, that would be fantastic. If you want to make a bird, you could go to hollygreenberg.com and check out our calendar of workshops. We've got workshops all over Chicagoland and beyond this summer. Or we're always open first Saturdays from 12 to 2, or by appointment. You can come by Greenleaf Street until December 1st and make a bird with us. So that's all I've got. I'm going to stop sharing. And I guess we'll take questions at the very end, right, Leslie, after Libby's
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate your talking with us about all this. So yes, and I guess I'll go to my I'll talk about Libby for 1 second here. Good. Oh, see, each time that happens. Sorry about that. Yes, so I wanted to introduce Libby as well, and then we'll go to questions. But I really appreciate your presentation. Thank you so much for this. And I already have my little questions on the side here. So Libby Shafer. Libby Shafer is a visionary urban ecologist, energetically focused on bringing her projects to underserved communities when we were doing this in Evanston as well. She's fascinated by lawn culture, bumblebees, and social and environmental change. She's currently pursuing a PhD at Northwestern University and the Chicago Botanic Gardens joint program in plant biology and conservation in the Rethinking of Lawns Lab. I don't know why that happened, but whatever. In the Rethinking of Lawns Lab. Her socio-ecological research explores shifts in lawn culture that better support plants, people, and pollinators. Libby was born and raised in Evanston and recently moved back. She also serves on the City of Evanston's Environment Board, and we're so glad you do. We really appreciate your serving on the board. Yes. So let me, Libby.
Yeah, thank you so much for the super warm introduction. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with you, and I'm really thankful for everyone to being here. Also, Holly, your project's amazing. I'm excited to ask you questions at the end too. Let me do a quick share. Let me know if you can't see that. Oops, there we go.
We do see it.
You do see it. Okay, great. So I am going to be doing a very overdue presentation about my master's thesis research called the Evanston Host Plant Initiative Native Flowers for the Rusty Patch Bumblebee that was done in collaboration with Leslie and Natural Habitat Evanston in 2021 and 2022. And I'm really excited to share the results with you all and then give a sneak peek of my project that I'm working on currently. So as Leslie mentioned, my name is Libby Shafer. I am a PhD student currently at Northwestern and the Chicago Botanic Garden. And the research that I'm presenting today is from my time in the Environmental Sciences Master's program at DePaul University under my advisor, Dr. Christy Klimas. This work recently was published in Urban Forestry and Urban Greening. I can share the paper with you all if you are interested. But first, before I present the results from this project, I would like to just briefly give a background about pollination bumblebees and the rusty patch bumblebee. So there are many pollinators, but bumblebees are extremely important pollinators. They are more efficient at pollinating than the well-known honeybees. Pollination occurs when bees are visiting flowers for nectar and pollen, and as they are visiting flowers, they are collecting pollen, sometimes incidentally just on their fur or fuzz. Probably not the technical term, but you can just see it all over their bodies. Bumblebees are unique in that they perform buzz pollination, in which they rapidly vibrate their wing muscles, as seen in this part of the video. And this creates this buzz vibration that enables some flowers to release pollen that wouldn't otherwise release pollen. So these are often flowers in the Solanaceae family, including tomatoes and eggplants. And you can see just in a moment that there's just this large amount of pollen being released to this vibration. It's pretty amazing. Let me see if it will let me advance. It will not, so I will just do this. So animal pollinators, especially bees, are very important because they support reproduction in about 87% of flowers and 35% of crops. And about 35% of native bee species in North America are at elevated risk of extinction. This project focuses on the rusty patch bumblebee, which is our endangered local bee. It's been federally listed in the US and Canada, and its population has declined over 87% in the last 20 years, primarily due to pathogen spillover from European bumblebees brought over for greenhouse pollination, as well as pesticide use, climate change, and land use change, so the lack of habitat and flowering resources. This was once a common bee, so it used to be spotted everywhere in the Midwestern, Eastern United States and Canada, including in 28 states and 2 provinces. Recently, it's only been present in 0.1% of its historical range and reported in 13 states, including in the Chicago region. In recent years, it's been seen at the Baha'i Temple in Wilmette, at the Rogers Park Metro Station, and I saw one at the Linney Prairie in Morden Grove. We also see them every year at the Botanic Garden too. I think there's a nest there. So I'm pretty sure they're in Evanston. I, don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but I believe that if we had more eyes on bumblebees and more training for how to look for the rusty patch bumblebee, we might see one, although they're really rare to spot. So I just want to give a very quick identification tip, which is that bumblebees you can identify based on the color markings on their back. So the rusty patch bumblebee is unique in that it has this thumbtack or umbrella shaped mark on the back of its head. And it has this floating rust patch that's surrounded by yellow, as well as this black line that goes from its wing to the top of its leg or its shoulder. And it has a look-alike, the brown belted bumblebee, which has black connected to the brown with this dot on the back of its head. So again, look for the floating rust patch. But it's okay if it's a brown belted bumblebee. You'll have to take a picture to confirm that it's a rusty patch bumblebee and put it in a naturalist, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So shifting back to the project, we wanted to use the rusty patch bumblebee as inspiration because it's a charismatic species. Its storyline just pulls at your heartstrings, and it also has plant preferences that we believe could guide planting efforts, as well as just planting with the idea of wanting to provide foraging resources for pollinators. So research has shown that by growing plants in your yard, you can actually make a difference for pollinator abundance and diversity. And it's best if many houses have flowers in their yards to support the connectivity of the garden. So connectivity means that the plants are within close enough proximity of each other to allow bumblebees to have sufficient foraging resources, but to also be able to find mates that are in different populations to preserve the genetic diversity of their species. So with that premise, I partnered with Natural Habitat Evanston for my master's thesis, which we called the Evanston Host Plant Initiative, or the Rusty Patch Bumblebee Project. And we recruited people to grow plants for the Rusty Patch Bumblebee. So at the time, there were only 38 plants that were said to be the Rusty Patch Bumblebee host plants. Since then, a new paper has come out with 80 plants, and more are being discovered as Rusty Patch Bumblebee favorites. But the 38 was a really great guide for this project. So people participated by growing host plants for the Rusty Patch Bumblebee, or joining our naturalist project and taking photos of any plants and bees that they saw. And then Terry Measley generally donated his time to go through all of the bumblebee observations and confirm whether or not the bumblebee was a rusty patch bumblebee. Spoiler alert, we did not see any rusty patch bumblebees through this project yet, although again, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we will have an Evanston sighting. Oh, also for those who aren't familiar with iNaturalist, it's a great species identification website and app where there's a community of people that will help confirm species identifications for both plants and animals. This cut off, I'm so sorry, but through this project, we had 275 participants, and we had grant money to have 2 plant giveaways with 815 plants. So this was at the Foster Street Urban Garden and C&W Ice Cream Parlor and Market, and we had amazing volunteers helping pass out these plants. We also hosted 2 bio blitzes where people were trained on how to use iNaturalist, and then they took pictures of bees and plants at the Civic Center Habitat Garden, as well as the Ladd Arboretum. So it was a great opportunity for gathering because this was in the pandemic era. And here's the picture of the C&W Ice Cream Parlor and Market plant giveaway. And again, we combined this community science project where people were taking photos of plants and bees and growing plants with using the iNaturalist data to understand more about the plants that are on the landscape and how we can best support bumblebees and the rusty patch bumblebee. So I'm going to shift into the research side of things. So my first research question was, how representative is the iNaturalist data of the actual distribution and abundance of host plants in the landscape? So can we use iNaturalist data to understand where there are plants in the landscape? I started by visiting all of the iNaturalist host plants, which I think started in 2012. The app was launched in 2008. So anything that was posted between 2012, well, 2008, but the first observation was 2012, and 2021. So that was a total of 382 plants. So I did a little scavenger hunt in Evanston, and I marked whether they were present, absent, inaccessible, which meant that they were in a backyard and I wasn't able to get to them, or not seen, which was usually if they were just in more of like a naturalized landscape amongst a lot of plants, and it was impossible to tell if that specific individual was there. But just looking at the present and absent plants, there was a 96% proportional presence. So 96% of those plants were still on the landscape, which is really amazing for the survival of those plants and for, knowing that those data points were pretty accurate. I also divided Evanston into 4 quadrants, and I did this meandering walk from the inside corners to the outside corners of each quadrant. And as I was going, I was taking photos of host plants that I saw from the sidewalk. So this wasn't a comprehensive survey, but it gave a snapshot of where the host plants are in people's front yards in Evanston. So I walked a total of 14.83 miles, and I took 522 photos of 931 host plants. My findings were that most of the host plants were in the southeast and southwest quadrants, which contradicted the iNaturalist data that represented most of the host plants being on the north side. And I was interested in this kind of northeast corner gap where there weren't host plants in the front yards. Although I will say, I think Evanston has been shifting more and more towards converting lawns into native plants and incorporating more native plants. So this also could have shifted somewhat since the project. My second research question was, what percentage of the land area in our study site, according to the iNaturalist data, has host plant connectivity within the maximum foraging distance of the rusty patch bumblebee? So this basically means that the rusty patch bumblebee, they've inferred, needs to have or can travel up to 0.6 miles to forage. That's what the foraging distance is. This was inferred from the common eastern bumblebee, which is, more easier to study because it's more commonly spotted. So I did a kernel density analysis, or a hotspot analysis, which showed the hotspots that had the greatest densities of iNaturalist host plants. And interestingly enough, so I broke this into each blooming period. So there's early blooming plants, mid blooming plants, and late blooming plants. And all of the hotspots were, interestingly, in North Evanston, including in Perkins Woods, Northwestern University, and Lighthouse Beaches, Lawson Park. But this might potentially because of iNaturalist usage bias, with just more people taking photos in those areas. I also did a buffer or connectivity analysis to see what parts of the landscape are within 0.3 miles, 0.6 miles, and 0.9 miles of an iNaturalist host plant. So this was just taking the 0.6 mile foraging distance into mind, and then doing a little wiggle room with the calculations. And I have I think 9 maps for this because I broke it down into early blooming, mid blooming, and late blooming. But these maps are of the cumulative plants, so all of the blooming periods together. And there was an increase in iNaturalist host plants through this project. And there was coverage in Evanston, throughout Evanston, with just kind of small gaps in the point when considering the 0.3 mile foraging distance. But when I broke down the different blooming periods, there was less coverage for connectivity in the late blooming period, which shows us that there might be benefits to growing more plants that are late blooming. So end of summer and early fall, to just support the foraging needs of the bees throughout the entire growing season. My third research question was, following our initiative, what was the percentage increase of host plants for the rusty patch bumblebee and other bees recorded on iNaturalist? And there was a huge increase of iNaturalist usage. This also might be because of the pandemic. People were often turning towards gardening and using iNaturalist. But there was a huge increase in both host plant observations and bee observations. And we also encouraged people to take pictures of the host plants that they were given from the plant giveaway, which was just fun to see these new plants that people shared on iNaturalist. This doesn't cover, obviously, all of the plants that we gave away, but it just shows an interesting angle that iNaturalist can be used for documenting plants that are freshly grown. So there were 10 observers with 29 host plants that were grown in 2021. And my fourth and last research question was my social question of, in what ways do people perceive and manage their yards as spaces for urban pollinator conservation? In particular, are community members aware of the rusty patch bumblebee? Do people intentionally grow host plants for specific pollinators like the rusty patch bumblebee? And do gardeners self-identify as environmentalists? So I did a very long social survey. Thank you so much. There are people in this that I'm sure took the survey. It was 54 questions, and I'm really grateful to everyone's responses. So there are questions for everybody, including their prior knowledge of bees, conservation actions taken for pollinators, and their gardening and yard maintenance practices. And then there are questions that were just for the people that participate in the project or the community scientists around their motivations and experiences with the project. So we had a total of 155 survey respondents, 95 who are project participants, and 57 who are not. And I'm just going to pull some of the kind of interesting trends that I saw. So the trends for the respondents were that the majority were homeowners, were females, and were white, and the majority were also employed, although there was a range of different demographics as well. And this is what I found to be super interesting, that the vast majority of people self-identified as environmentalists and were enthusiastic gardeners and had grown pollinator plants before, which makes sense. This was a super long survey with no incentives other than just to contribute to research. But the 70% of people had not heard of or didn't have any prior knowledge about the rusty patch bumblebee, which highlights the importance of raising awareness about this bee and other bees and pollinators. And the majority of people agreed that bees are an important part of the ecosystem, that their actions in their yard or garden can help bees and other pollinators. And they care about doing things for bees and other pollinators, and they consider their yard or garden as a part of the ecosystem, and that their landscaping and gardening affects the ecosystem. But what was interesting, which I actually didn't get into in the paper, was that the ideas around responsibility to provide habitat really kind of varied a little bit more. I mean, still the majority of people thought that they had a responsibility, as well as the city has a responsibility to conserve bees and other pollinators, but it was more divided than the other questions, which was interesting. So in conclusion, the iNaturalist data was representative of a portion of the host plants in the landscape. So I think it can be a really great tool for knowing which plants are on the landscape, with fair confidence that they've probably survived since being posted, although it wasn't as representative in where the host plants are. So just considering that there are a lot more host plants, which is pretty obvious, but yeah, there are a lot more host plants on the landscape than captured on iNaturalist, and there are some user biases in there where people often are documenting plants at parks. So having more documentation and yards across Evanston would be really great to be able to use that data even further. It was impressive. Almost all of Evanston had host plant connectivity within the jumping distance or the maximum foraging distance of the rusty patch bumblebee. Although, even though it's, there are plants within the maximum foraging distance, it's great if we can have just greater densities of plants they don't have to travel as far to get to. In 2021, the main year of this project, there was a huge increase in iNaturalist users who documented a record amount of host plants in Evanston. And the majority of survey respondents perceived and managed their yards for urban pollinator conservation. So my current project in my PhD program is, taking this to another dimension in this project called Bees on the Block. It's a collective planting project in people's front yards and parkways. And this project was designed in considering that there are a lot of social pressures that people face in maintaining their lawns, and what if neighbors could get together to convert their lawns into pollinator plants? So in February, my husband and I delivered mulch and cardboard to 60 people's homes. We have 5 blocks participating, and they use this as a sheet mulching method to create a garden bed in part of their turf grass. This is the one at my house. My block is participating. And so we have this pollinator garden in the front yard with 8 different species of 3 plants per species. And then we're also doing a native lawn alternatives experiment in the parkway in which I sprinkled native seeds directly into the turf grass to see if anything would grow. So the seeds were really successful in a greenhouse experiment that I did before, but they were living their best life and taken really good care of by the Botanic Gardens production team. So we're really not sure if this one will work, but we're keeping our fingers crossed because it would be a really amazing way to be able to have more people involved in urban pollinator conservation without having to do the intensive work of gardening. Although gardening is wonderful work too. But to be able to sprinkle seeds and water them would be great. So if you would like to follow along, I am expanding this to more neighbors on the participating blocks, and I hope that this can evolve into something else in the future once I graduate too. You can find this project at hostplant.net. So I've rebranded the Evanston Host Plant Network as our Host Plant Initiative is the Host Plant Network, which houses all of my different research projects. So you can sign up for the newsletter and follow along. And then we also have Instagram that I'm going to try to be more active on pretty soon. And ultimately, we hope that by engaging more and more people in growing flowers in their front yards and parkways, our blocks can go from looking like this and covered with turf grass to being just thriving with native plants and maybe even the rusty patch bumblebee. So I have so many people to thank. I won't go through the whole list, but Natural Habitat Evanston was really essential in this project. And I'm just so grateful for all of the community scientists and community partners, and my advisor, Christy Klimas, and I had some really wonderful sponsors, and my artist friend, Ava DeCapri, who made the beautiful artwork for this. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. That is so great. I so appreciate your presentation to us. And so I do have some questions. I'll ask you, and then I'll ask Holly if that's okay. And I hope people will pop up their questions as well. So my question is, about a few years ago, there was an effort to save a prairie, the Bell Bowl Prairie, because there was the rusty patch bumblebee identified as, having some nesting sites there. And I understood that the rusty patch, the I think U.S. Fish and Wildlife decided that the property was not did not qualify as an area that should be protected for an endangered species because the habits of the rusty patch bumblebee and the potential nesting sites were not well identified so that it couldn't predict where they would really need to be. And that's really horrible because it's like a catch-22. Well, we don't, while the species are going extinct, we don't know enough about them, so we can't protect them, basically. You know what I'm saying? So I wondered if and you touched on this a tiny bit, but I wondered if there's more evidence of exactly what habitat needs to be protected, or is it still kind of I don't know, hard to get protection of areas because there's not real certainty about where the what the rusty patch needs. So what do you think?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm saying it properly, but
Oh yeah, I
yeah.
know, I totally get. Yeah, I've been wanting to look into this more, so I have just a surface level answer at the moment. I was going to include initially a slide about the Belleville Prairie Initiative because it was just this amazing effort. It happened at the time of my project, and it was incredible that this rusty patch bumblebee halted construction of the airport for a while until it didn't. We were all on the edge of our seats. But there has been updated protections for the rusty patch bumblebee, and I found them to be a little concerning, although again, I haven't had time to fully dig into them. But I think first of all, it's just really hard to find bumblebee nests in general. Like there's really not a whole lot known about bumblebee nesting, although there was one paper in Madison that found they had pictures of different rusty patch bumblebee nesting sites in people's yards, which was pretty amazing. But I think some of those protections have been with the idea that bumblebees often nest at the forest edges, which I think is true. But I feel like and I've heard other people say there's, just so much more to be discovered about nesting sites in urban and residential areas too. So it is disappointing. I feel like it's not as comprehensive of protection as it could be. But again, I can't fully speak to it because I haven't
No, yeah,
really looked
that's
into it.
right.
Yeah.
Right, right. Okay, okay. And Tim Sunder also asked, so overseeding partridge pea, for example, has worked for him, but does it work better where there's more soil and less competition? I don't know if partridge pea was one of your
Partridge pea is one of mine. So partridge pea in the greenhouse experiment, so I seeded into soil and grass, and it was the one that was thriving. It grew 3 feet in both the soil and the grass. So that's the one I'm really hopeful. It has a huge personality, so I think it might do well in this. And it's an annual, so it comes up really quickly.
Okay, okay, great.
Yeah.
That's great. So, somebody asked me if that's a Cope's gray tree frog on my thing, and I believe it is, and it was a tree frog, but I'm not sure if it was a Cope's gray. To be honest, I can't remember. It was a tree frog that was on my beehive in Indiana, which I no longer raise honeybees because I was just taking away habitat from native bees, and what am I doing? So, but in any case. So Holly, I had some thoughts for you too. So you're already more than you're a third of the way done with your project, and it seems like it's accelerating, to be honest. It seems like there are more people and more resources, even though I know you lost your studio space, so we got to figure that out. But so I'm wondering though, like, can you see the end actually of this? Are you actually thinking planning for what the next phase of this is? Or is that too?
Yeah, I think so. No, it definitely, since I arrived in Evanston in October, it has really taken off. I mean, exponentially. So we've made thousands of birds since I've arrived, and that's just way faster than we were before. So not only with workshops that I'm running around Evanston and Chicago, but because of the press, there's so much, like an article just came out in Colossal, which is an international arts blog. So already, this was 2 weeks ago, already a woman in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico is shipping a box of 24 birds that her and her community have made since that article came out. So birds are flying in. We have hundreds of birds coming in the mail every couple weeks.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, all right. So do you know like how would this work? You're going to put them together as a carpet and then try to find different locations and maybe schlep it around?
Yeah, schlep it around. That's right. No, so the intention is that we will sew the birds onto 10-foot lengths of like red carpet, like Hollywood red carpet. That's so if anybody has a connection to used Hollywood red carpet, I need it. And they will be 10-foot lengths and approximately 300 feet of that, so 30 of those. And they'll be arranged according to the calendar year of when they died. So you'll be able to walk along the carpet and see what does it look like on March 1st? How many birds are coming through Chicago and crashing into windows versus May 1st versus May 15th versus, October 5th. And you'll be able to see visually what each day in the calendar year looks like in terms of dead birds, or even, really that reflects live birds too. How many birds are overhead on any given day? Where it will be exhibited, we don't know yet. It's still really at least 4 years out before that, because we've got a couple
Yeah,
more years making birds and then a couple more years of assembling this carpet, which is going to be, I mean, I'm going to need a team of sewers. So
right, right.
maybe the Field Museum, maybe McCormick Place, maybe the Art
If it's a
Institute.
red carpet, it's got to be at the Oscars.
It's got to be at the Oscars. Yeah, I don't know if I want it outside, to be honest, but
Okay.
And Peggy Noterbart is interested in exhibiting it. So,
Yeah.
and